One day, a girl named Mari was introduced to her younger brother. His name was Shion. The birth of Shion made Mari very happy because now she no longer felt alone. Mari was a cheerful child. She always took care of and accompanied her little brother with love. As time went by, Shion grew up to be a diligent boy. He often helped his mother and even stopped collecting toys. However, Mari noticed that Shion often played alone, as if he were practicing martial arts. One night, Shion asked his father, "Do monsters really exist?" His father replied that monsters did exist, and even other races such as fairies sometimes appeared in human settlements. Hearing that, Shion began to think that magic might exist in this world. However, his father said he had never heard of or spoken about magic with anyone. Since then, Shion never mentioned magic again. Even so, he became even more diligent, studying harder and reading many books. Meanwhile, Mari began training her body more seriously. She wanted to become strong enough to protect herself if she ever met a monster. Besides that, as an older sister, she wanted to be able to protect and help her brother. One day, while training near the lake, together with her friend, Mari saw a ball of light emerging from the water. The next day, she took Shion back to the lake to show him the glowing orb. However, not everyone could see it. She had also tried showing the light to others before, but they saw nothing. Mari said that the glowing orb looked like the magic Shion once talked about. As night approached, they went home. The next day, they returned to the lake to find out where the light came from. After fishing for a while, Mari's friend named Rose came and joined them. Rose was one of the few people who could also see the mysterious light. So the three of them waited for it to appear. That afternoon, the ball of light appeared again around the lake. To discover its source, Shion decided to dive into the water, and Mari immediately followed him. They tried to touch the glowing sphere to feel its sensation. Unfortunately, even when they were close enough, they still couldn't tell where it came from. Shion assumed the light was created by creatures living in the lake, including the fish. Coincidentally, at that moment, Rose caught a female fish. When she placed it together with a male, they realized that the glowing orb was produced when the two fish joined as one. Seeing that, Mari began to think that she wanted to become Shion's partner. But she knew that they were siblings by blood, so it could never happen. Even so, Mari wished to live together with Shion forever. Shion felt the same way. Because of that, he decided never to marry and to always stay by Mari's side. It turned out that their strong bond triggered the appearance of a similar glowing light, just like the paired fish from before. From that moment, Shion began to develop an ambition to create magic that had never existed in this world. Before being reincarnated into another world, Shion was a 30-year-old virgin man. He had long dreamed of becoming a wizard. To make that dream come true, he was willing to do anything, even staying single for 3 decades. Yet no matter how hard he tried, Shion could never use magic and eventually died of a heart attack. After his death, Shion was reborn into another world. Although his new world had no concept of magic, somehow what he had always sought felt closer than ever. One day, while lying in his room, Mari came in and invited him to have some snacks together. But Shion used that moment to test his magical ability. He asked Mari to sit beside him, then confessed that he truly liked her, even though they were siblings. Shion's confession made Mari blush. That emotion triggered a reaction within Shion, a sign that his magical power was awakening. Mari felt he was teasing her. But to avoid misunderstanding, Shion clarified that his feelings were genuine. From that, Shion concluded that his magic could be activated through strong emotions. He then tried to recall those feelings again until his whole body started to shine. Shion's theory turned out to be right. His magical power emerged when he was filled with deep emotion. However, just making his body glow wasn't enough. Shion wanted to produce the same glowing orb the fish had made by the lake. To achieve it, he began a series of experiments. Not long after, the light finally appeared. Thinking it might have destructive power, Shion tried punching the wall. But the result was the opposite. The light had no destructive force at all and only made his hand hurt. Even though he failed, Shion didn't give up. He vowed to keep training his magic until all his energy was completely drained. Unfortunately, his training time was limited. That day, he had to attend sword training with his father. Shion didn't really want to, since he hated hurting anyone. But his father said that swords weren't meant only for fighting humans, and the training went on. When it came to swordsmanship, Shion was terrible, the complete opposite of his older sister, who was quite skilled. After the training ended, Shion returned to focus on his magic practice. This time, he wanted to test how much magical energy he could release all at once. Not long after, his father invited him to go to Istria, a medium-sized city nearest to where they lived. There, they bought daily necessities and picked up a sword order as Mari's birthday present. On another day, a villager came and reported that his friends had been killed by goblins. The news was immediately delivered to the village chief. At the same time, Shion was training his magic endurance. During this training, he tried to release a much larger amount of energy than before. Not long after, Shion's father received a report that goblins had appeared in their territory. He quickly gathered the adult men to face the threat. While many people panicked, Shion instead felt excited. He thought goblins were weak monsters and might become useful subjects to help him develop his magic. Unfortunately, reality did not go as expected. The goblin turned out to be quite intelligent. It managed to break a window and sneak into the upper floor where the refugees were hiding. When the goblin found them, Shion's mother tried to protect the children, but the terrifying appearance of the goblin made her unable to stand, let alone fight back. With her new sword, Mari bravely stepped forward, but her attempt ended in failure. The goblin threw its weapon, knocking Mari down and leaving her helpless. The mother quickly shielded Mari from the next attack. As a result, she was struck by the goblin and almost died on the spot. Seeing his family in danger, Shion couldn't stay still. He stepped forward and grabbed the goblin's arm while focusing his energy into his hand. His magical energy turned out to be quite effective. The light wounded the goblin and slowly defeated it. This was the first time Shion's power truly became useful. Because of the attack, Shion's mother suffered internal injuries that could threaten her life. Without wasting time, Shion asked someone to bring him a sewing kit, clean cloth, and liquor with high alcohol content. Once everything was ready, he asked for help from a tailor to stitch his mother's wound. The stitching was successful, and the bleeding stopped on its own. Seeing his mother safe made Mari burst into tears of relief. She immediately hugged Shion and thanked him sincerely. Meanwhile, Shion's father and the villagers managed to find the goblin's nest in the forest. However, after realizing there were more than 2 goblins, they quickly returned to the village to check the surroundings. During the hunt, several people were injured, but luckily there were no fatalities. The next day, the village was peaceful again. Shion and his family could finally call a doctor to check on his mother's condition. According to the doctor, the wound had been stitched perfectly, so neat that he even thought a medical expert had done it. After the incident, Shion's father called his son and began to question him. He asked Shion where he had learned medical knowledge and how he managed to defeat the goblin. Shion answered honestly. He admitted that all this time he had been developing his own magic. After the goblin attack incident, Shion's magic power was considered dangerous. At first, his father forbade him from continuing his research, but after seeing Shion's unshakable determination, his father finally gave in and decided to fully support his son's dream. At that time, Shion was researching the interaction between his magic and fire. In one experiment, he tried channeling his magic into a small flame. The result was that the fire turned blue and suddenly flared back toward him. Fortunately, his father reacted quickly and put out the fire before any serious injuries occurred. Curious about the result, Shion asked his father to increase the flame's size. Strangely, even though it burned brighter, the fire's color and temperature remained stable, calm and smokeless. Soon after, Ross came over to see Shion. Since Shion was soaking wet, she was curious about what he was doing. Xian explained that he was studying magic attributes. On that occasion, he expressed his gratitude to Ross. He felt thankful for her help during the goblin attack. Her presence gave him confidence. A few moments later, Xian, Mari, and Ross gathered with Xian's father to discuss the progress of their experiments. The main focus was the manipulation of fire, which still seemed difficult for Xian to control. But surprisingly, Mari and Ross had already managed to release magical energy from their hands, a feat that Xian himself had not yet achieved. With renewed spirit, Xian tried to imitate them. He used a lighter as an aid to create a small burst of flame. Though not perfect, the result was quite satisfying. Xian was overjoyed as his long-held dream of using magic was finally starting to come true.
Meanwhile, Mari trained even harder with her sword. She didn't want to fall behind her brother, to the point she injured her own hand from the intense practice. On another day, Xian asked his father if there were any creatures or plants that could produce lightning. He had begun to think about developing a magic with the lightning attribute. His father explained that although no such creatures existed, there was a natural material that resembled it. It was a thunder ore seed, sometimes found deep within mines. However, this ore was extremely dangerous if touched directly. Xian then asked if there was any natural rubber-like material that could act as an insulator. But rubber trees didn't exist in this world. As an alternative, he chose to use paper crystal, a costly material known for its superior insulation. Fortunately, his father was willing to buy it to help realize Xian's experiment. With paper crystal as protection, Xian successfully carried the thunder seed safely. In front of his family, he once again began his experiment. Slowly, he channeled his magical energy into the seed. The result was a lightning explosion that perfectly matched the lightning attribute. According to Xian, the experiment was a success. However, he still couldn't convert magic into pure electricity as he desired. That afternoon, Xian met Mari, who was still practicing. He realized she was training that hard because of him. Touched by his sister's spirit, Xian promised himself to always support her and stand by her side. Since her relationship with Xian improved, Mari had become more attached than ever. She almost refused to be apart from him, even when he was still busy with his magic trials. Though sometimes distracting, Mari's presence actually made Xian more motivated. In this experiment, Xian focused on studying the transformation of mana and its spreading patterns. He discovered that when mana was dispersed widely, its energy quickly thinned out. On the contrary, if it was condensed into a small volume, its pressure and intensity increased dramatically. The experiment with the thunder seed brought surprising results. When Xian channeled condensed mana, the ore conducted electricity and struck back at him. From that incident, Xian realized that mana held limitless potential, yet he couldn't fully explore it due to his lack of knowledge and experience. A few days later, Xian's father introduced him to a man named Grass, someone who had used Xian's discovery to collect thunder ores on a massive scale. Grass was facing a problem. The thunder ores he gathered turned unstable and couldn't be sold because they kept striking each other. Grass asked Xian to help him find a solution. Xian agreed, but he reminded Grass not to expect too much, since he himself didn't have a definite answer yet. When Grass showed how the ore sparked when brought close, Xian immediately got an idea. He suggested refining the ores into metal form, which would be easier to shape. However, the melting process caused the ores to lose their electrical charge. To solve that, Xian intervened and used magic during the heating process. The result was astonishing. The refined metal could now store and release electrical energy. With this success, they went on to develop new lightning-based magic devices. Their first invention was the lightning lamp, a lamp that could glow without fire or fuel. Next, they created the lightning igniter, a small device that could start a fire more easily than a normal one. Grass didn't hesitate to praise Xian's brilliance. On the way home with his family, Xian got a new inspiration. He wanted to make a tool that could synchronize magic with his body, something to maximize his magical power. But before realizing that idea, one thing kept bothering his mind. He wondered why magical flames never went out, even without oxygen.
To investigate, Xian conducted an experiment. He released a flame into the air and asked Mari to channel her magical energy toward it. Unexpectedly, the reaction went far beyond his expectations. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurred, far stronger than the magic used. From that event, Xian realized something crucial. It wasn't just mana reacting, but the air around them. In other words, the mana they released shared similar traits with the wind element. Not long after, the device Xian had ordered was finally completed. Without wasting time, he used it to test his magical strength. The result was extraordinary. He could release bursts of flame and lightning strikes far more powerful than before. Xian was overjoyed. After years of struggle, he had finally mastered the magic he once could only dream of. Now, he wasn't just able to use magic, but to create entirely new forms of it. Lately, Xian had begun to doubt his own lineage. He recalled his father's words that he was a child entrusted to him. Those words echoed endlessly in his mind. Because of that, whenever he trained with Mari, his thoughts often wandered. If they weren't related by blood, he wondered if maybe they could marry someday. But such thoughts only made him uneasy and overwhelmed. To distract himself,
Xian chose to devote all his focus to advanced magic research. He was now studying compound magic, the fusion of multiple magic attributes to create new reactions. Previously, he had experimented by spreading mana into the air to create fire and lightning. This time, he wanted to know whether mana could also react with magic itself. In the experiment he conducted, mana indeed reacted to water. This indicated that he could create magic with a water attribute. Unfortunately, using water from lakes or rivers wasn't practical in battle, so Xian looked for another way, by utilizing air humidity. He realized that by spreading mana over a wide range, he could draw and gather water vapor from the surrounding atmosphere. Seeing Xian master water magic, Mari and Rose immediately became interested in learning it too. Within a short time, both of them succeeded in mastering it. Witnessing this success, Xian began to think about taking his magic to the next level. A few days later, Xian, Mari, and Rose went to the Adventurers Guild to take on a monster extermination mission. They were accompanied by Grass, who also brought them into the guild. Grass personally recommended the three to register, but that wasn't all. Xian's father unexpectedly arrived and gave his own recommendation as a diamond-ranked adventurer. Thanks to that, their registration was instantly approved, and their first mission began right away. In that mission, they were assigned to clear an area infested with a horde of wild monsters. When the battle began, Xian's father charged ahead first, showing immense power and wiping out the monsters in just seconds. After that, it was Xian's turn and the others to act. Xian opened with explosion and fire magic, burning through the enemy ranks before him. Mari and Rose attacked in close range using their swords, while Xian supported them from behind with lightning and bursts of flame. Their formation looked perfectly coordinated. They managed to eliminate all the monsters without any real difficulty. However, even though their father praised them, they weren't given time to rest. They immediately set out toward an old mine suspected to be the monster's next den. Along the way, Xian sensed something strange. There was a faint vibration within the mine, a sound barely audible. When he investigated, he found that the source of that feeling was a small fairy trapped inside the mine. Feeling pity, Xian decided to free it. After completing the mission and confirming that the mine was safe, they all returned home. For the first time in a long while, they could enjoy a peaceful time together as a family. Xian had just created a new spell, a high-pressure wind magic capable of unleashing a powerful blast. With this magic, he managed to annihilate an entire group of goblins they encountered in the forest with a single strike. Though only 10 years old, Xian's power had already surpassed that of most adult adventurers.
Meanwhile, Rose and Mari were now 12 years old, making them look more mature than Shion in terms of appearance. While walking around the city, Shion began to notice something new. He was now able to see a person's mana capacity with just a single glance. Yet among all the people he observed, none had mana as strong as Mari and Rose. This uniqueness made Shion proud of them. Not long after, the three of them arrived at Grass's shop. Shion came to pick up a pair of magic gloves, a type of tool designed to improve control over one's magic. Inside the shop, Mari and Rose mentioned that they were about to be promoted to silver rank in the Adventurers Guild. Grass listened with a proud smile, since no other kids their age had ever reached silver before. After that, Shion joined another training session with his father. This time, Shion was allowed to attack freely using magic, while his father would only defend using sword techniques. At one moment, Shion tried combining multiple spells and succeeded in trapping his father underground. This made his father unable to move, and the training was declared Shion's victory. Even so, Shion still didn't feel satisfied. He still wanted to train even harder so that one day he could fly using magic. On the other hand, Mari was also showing incredible progress. Although she had never won a single match against her father during training, she was now able to overwhelm him. After the training ended, Sion and Mari went to see Ross to help drive away the Ramuses in the garden. However, that afternoon, the weather changed drastically. Rain suddenly poured down. Even though the sky had been so clear before, Mari suddenly collapsed and lost consciousness. After being brought home and examined, it was discovered that Mari had contracted a disease that caused its victims to lose strength and consciousness without warning. The problem was the illness was spreading rapidly and attacking many people at the same time. To make matters worse, nighttime was the most dangerous period when monsters started roaming around. Sion asked his father to let him join the trip to the hospital. He insisted on helping until his father finally gave him permission. On the way, Sion noticed a red light glowing in the sky. Strangely, only he could see it. Then, a horde of monsters appeared and began chasing their carriage. Sion's father kept his focus on driving, while Sion went to the back to help fight them off. He used water magic to attack, which turned out to be very effective in the rain. Suddenly, a spirit monster appeared, an invisible entity that was immune to physical attacks. Fortunately, Sion managed to defeat the spirit using magic. Magical energy was the only weakness that creature had. After a fierce battle, they finally reached the hospital. However, the situation there wasn't any better. Mari couldn't be treated right away because many other patients were suffering from the same symptoms. A day after Mari was diagnosed with the fatigue disease, her family decided to stay in the Istria region. Seeing his sister lying weak and helpless made Sion extremely worried. He refused to do anything except stay by Mari's side in her room. Not long after, Sion's father took him somewhere. He explained that several people had been attacked and killed by the same spirit monster that had chased them before. Since Sion had once managed to repel the creature, his father believed that Sion was the only one capable of handling this threat. But Sion refused. He insisted on staying with his sister. Even so, his father kept persuading him, saying that if Sion helped, many lives might be saved. His father's words reminded Sion of what Mari had once told him. She said that his magical power might one day be able to save many people. That memory made Sion realize he couldn't keep shutting himself off. He had to start caring about others. After calming himself, Sion returned to Mari's room and noticed something strange. He realized that Mari had lost her magical energy. Feeling suspicious, he began examining the magical energy of people in the city. From this, Sion concluded that all the patients suffering from the fatigue disease had lost their magic energy. Later, Sion was summoned by the region's ruler Duke Balve. Together with his father, they discussed how to deal with two major problems, the nocturnal monsters and the fatigue disease spreading among the citizens. Sion presented several ideas, one of which was to conduct experiments on a living monster. He believed the fatigue disease was caused by the loss of magical energy and he wanted to find a way to restore it. Duke Balve approved the proposal and granted him permission to carry out the experiment. He also introduced Sion to a team of experts, including medical staff and monster researchers. However, since Sion was still a child, one of the doctor's assistants, Cole, thought this would only be a waste of time. Alongside Cole, Sion was also accompanied by a knight named Rapina and a shy monster expert named Bridget. During the introduction, Sion made it clear that he didn't see this mission as child's play. To prove his determination and ability, he immediately demonstrated his magic power. After they understood what magic was, Sion explained that magical energy was directly linked to the fatigue disease. While Cole worked at the clinic, Sion, Rapina, and Bridget began searching for a live monster for experimentation. However, when they found one, Rapina ended up killing it, completely forgetting their original purpose. On another day, Cole invited Sion to the clinic. There, they met a patient who, despite suffering from the fatigue disease, was still able to respond slightly. Sion tried channeling mana to observe the reaction. As he did, the patient's pulse began to rise. The patient seemed to respond, even blinking once. Although it showed signs of improvement, the method couldn't yet be confirmed as effective in curing the illness. They needed to monitor the patient longer and gradually increase the mana output. Shortly after, another doctor approached them. To prevent Sion from talking openly about magic, Cole quickly pulled him aside so they wouldn't attract attention. That night, Sion spent some time with Mari. He tried channeling mana into his sister's body, hoping her condition would improve. The next day, Sion continued his research, this time accompanied by Rapina and Bridget. They once again conducted experiments to observe the effect of mana infusion on monsters. The result was just as expected. The monster suffered burns, and parts of its body began to disappear if the mana flow continued. On another occasion, Sion experimented on a dorut fish. Unlike the monster, the fish remained completely fine even after receiving a large amount of mana. Seeing the difference in reaction, Sion began to suspect that the response to mana might differ in humans. To prove his theory, he needed a human specimen. Roz was one of the few people who still had mana and remained conscious. For that reason, she volunteered to be a test subject. Even though it was risky, Roz was willing to try it to help Mari. Sion then started channeling mana into Roz's body slowly. The result was quite encouraging. Roz didn't feel any pain and suffered no injury at all. The next day, Sion gathered with his teammates. They casually talked about the war against monsters that happened 1,000 years ago. Meanwhile, Duke Balt began summarizing all the findings related to the fatigue disease. He noted that when patients were infused with mana, they showed positive responses. But since the 350th day, not a single patient had shown signs of recovery, and Sion still hadn't found a new way to treat them. Even so, Sion didn't give up. He was determined to study the fatigue disease for the rest of his life in order to cure his sister, who had been bedridden for so long. One night, Sion noticed the sky turning red. Soon after, a group of spirit monsters started heading toward the city. The guards were nearly attacked by those creatures, but Sion quickly acted, saving them and managing to defeat several spirits. After the incident, Sion immediately reported it to Duke Balt. Upon hearing the report, the Duke ordered the city defense forces to guard the gates using thunder lamps. However, Sion assumed that protection wouldn't be strong enough, so he decided to join the battle himself to strike back. Unfortunately, Sion's arrival at the army base wasn't well received by Commander Lan. Instead of supporting him, Lan mocked Sion for waking up the soldiers without a clear reason. Shortly after, Rapina suddenly appeared as the captain of Unit 75, announcing that her unit would assist Sion in dealing with the spirit monster attack. Meanwhile, Roz and her mother still faithfully watched over Mari, who remained unconscious. They weren't only worried about Mari's condition, but also hoped Sion would return safely. Sion and Rapina began monitoring the movement of the spirit monsters. 5 of them were detected inside the city. However, Sion decided to head to the gate since the number of enemies there was much greater. Upon arriving at the gate, the guards initially thought Sion was a suspicious child, but they were stunned the moment they saw Sion use magic to fight the spirit monsters. With his power, Sion managed to slaughter the monsters in front of the gate. However, there were still 100 more spirit monsters preparing to invade the city. Until reinforcements arrived, Rapina and her unit swore to defend the gate with everything they had. But because the number of soldiers was too few, only Sion and Rapina were left fighting on the front line. Sion unleashed his full magical power, while Rapina fought using a magic torch. When her weapon was knocked away, one of her members handed her a sword infused with fire magic. With that weapon, Rapina resumed the fierce battle. Sion didn't want to lose to Rapina. He continued fighting using every ounce of his strength. Then he realized something strange. Even after using magic more than 100 times, he didn't feel like he was running out of mana. He suspected this might be related to the nighttime terror phenomenon. There could be a connection between that and the fatigue disease affecting so many families. Still, Sion didn't have time to think about that theory. His main focus now was to stop the spirit monsters that kept coming. Unfortunately, even after unleashing all his power, the number of monsters didn't decrease. Sion began to feel hopeless and powerless. But just when things were at their worst, Garrus and the adventurers arrived to help. They managed to defeat the monsters with magic fire arrows. Not long after, the defense troops came out from the gate. However, instead of providing support, Commander Lan accused Sion of lying and spreading panic among the soldiers. While Lan was still talking, suddenly a mysterious man appeared behind him. That man was no ordinary human. He came from the race of demons and possessed the ability to control mana. With a threatening aura and a dominating presence, that demon introduced himself as Einwalt, an immortal being who had lived for thousands of years and had once been sealed away for a very long time. Sion, who was sensitive to magic, immediately realized that Einwalt possessed extraordinary magical power. Without wasting any time, he warned everyone to run away at once. However, Einwalt gave them no chance. Without saying a single word, he unleashed a devastating magic attack that caused a massive explosion and took the lives of many. Amid the chaos, Sion managed to save Bridget and Rapina. He told them to get out immediately, believing there was no other way to defeat this demon except with magic. Based on his observation, Sion estimated that Einwalt's magic power could be 100 times greater than his own, something that made it almost impossible for an ordinary human to win. Yet, Grass chose to keep fighting beside Sion. When Einwalt attacked the settlement, Sion blocked him from the front, while Grass tried to strike from behind. Einwalt was surprised to see an ordinary human capable of using mana. But that surprise quickly turned into mockery, as Sion was still clumsy in controlling his mana. Einwalt began his assault with fire element magic, and Sion countered with water element spells. Elsewhere, Bridget and Rapina were busy evacuating the townspeople from the battlefield. Once the evacuation was complete, Rapina hurried back to assist Sion in the fight. Meanwhile, Einwalt launched another deadly strike, a massive fireball. Sion dodged and shattered the ground beneath him, then unleashed a counterattack combining fire and lightning magic. Unfortunately, Einwalt managed to nullify the attack as his understanding of elemental logic far surpassed Sion's. Unlike Cyan, who needed a magical medium, Einwald could wield pure magic directly, having mastered elemental control since ancient times. Grass tried to strike from behind, but his attack failed. Einwald retaliated with brutal force. Even Cyan's father joined the battle, yet all their efforts were in vain, for Einwald's magic barrier was far too strong to be broken. Though nearly out of options, Cyan still stood tall, his eyes filled with determination and not a trace of fear. That unyielding spirit impressed Einwald, who even called Cyan a descendant of Legret, a legendary figure known as the enemy of the demon race. Out of admiration, Einwald expressed his desire to make Cyan his follower. But when he tried to drink Cyan's blood as a binding ritual, Einwald screamed in pain, for Cyan's blood carried the blessing of the elves. That chance wasn't wasted by Cyan. With the last bit of strength he had left, he launched a decisive strike and finally managed to defeat Ewell. After the fierce battle against Einwald, Cyan fell into a deep sleep for several days. His unusually long slumber made his parents worried. They feared that Cyan might have the same illness as his sister. When Cyan woke up, he found his father and several others already waiting by his side. With a weak voice, Cyan asked them, "Is everyone safe?" Cole replied that Rapina and Bridget only suffered minor injuries. Marie and Ross were also fine, not affected by Einwald's direct magical attack. But during Cyan's unconscious days, the city had fallen into chaos. The death toll reached more than 400 people. That news left Cyan speechless. Regret was clearly written on his face. Not long after that, Cyan realized something had changed inside him. His mana capacity had increased rapidly, though still not comparable to Einwald's. Cyan then decided to try healing Mari. All this time, he believed that with enough mana power, the sloth disease could be cured. Without hesitation, he began channeling mana into Mari's body. At first, there was no reaction, but moments later, Mari slowly opened her eyes. Though she wasn't fully recovered yet, it was a huge improvement. Cyan continued the healing process with hope. Then, a miracle happened. Mari truly woke up and could speak to him again. It was a touching moment for their family. The next day, Cyan began helping other patients suffering from the same sloth disease. Once everything had calmed down, Cyan was summoned to meet the Duke. In that meeting, the Duke gave him the freedom to ask anything he wanted. Cyan then asked the question that had long weighed on his heart: who he really was. He had always felt strange, being treated specially since he was a child. Even the Duke himself seemed to trust him as if he already knew that Cyan could use magic. Duke Buff finally revealed the truth that had been hidden all this time. He explained that Cyan was a descendant of the Legret, a rare lineage with red hair and immense magical power. But because of a curse from the demon race, that lineage was declared extinct. Years ago, a woman came carrying a baby. She said that the child was the last descendant of the Legret and would one day become humanity's hope. Unfortunately, the queen did not believe her. That's why Gawain, Cyan's father, was ordered to raise the child in secret. After hearing that story, Cyan went home with a heart full of turmoil. Then he visited Mari, who was still in recovery. With a gentle voice, Mari shared her fear when the sloth disease struck. She said it felt like being trapped in darkness. But Cyan's voice, and the voices of those who loved her, could still be heard in that darkness. That was what kept her holding on until now. Day by day, Cyan began training his magic again. This time, he tried to develop new techniques once used by Einwald. He wanted to understand the logic of Elman and wield it without any tools. But after a few training sessions, he received a letter from Queen Lexia. The letter was an official summons to the capital. Cyan knew that the time for farewell had come. He had to leave the town, leave his family, and the friends who had become like siblings to him.